I'm Mike from historicalboardgaming.com. I'm going to be walking you through some of the basics on America today. We're going to go through army build, setup, and the first turn to give you a feel of how it's going to play out when you get your copy of America. Alright, let's go ahead and check it out, because remember, America is where history meets sci-fi. Okay, let's start out by covering the build rules. Now, at the beginning of the game, the Allied forces get 80 points to spend on building their army. Each Axis army gets 100 points to spend at the beginning, so the Axis are going to outnumber the Allies by quite a bit. In the build rules, you must build a minimum of 20 points worth of infantry units, but a maximum of 40. That way it limits giant infantry stacks, but it does force you to buy some. So the first thing I always do when I'm building my army is get that 20 points out of the way right away. So let's go ahead and do that. There's 2 infantry, 4, 6, 8, and 10. Infantry are worth 2 points apiece, so with 10 infantry, that's our 20 points. We're done. I always like to build a little bit extra for the Germans, and they're going to need some heavier hitters, so I go with mechanized infantry. Let's add 4 more mechanized infantry here. Those are worth 3 apiece, plus 2 more, so that's a total of 6. 6 mechanized infantry is going to be worth a total of 18. Added to our 20 points, we've got 38 points worth of infantry. That's under our 40-point limit. We're good to go. Next, we're going to add some tactical units to our infantry units to give them some heavy hitters. Real simple. For every 2 infantry units you buy, you're allowed to buy 1 tactical unit. Tactical units are going to be your self-propelled artillery, medium tanks, and jet fighters. So let's get some of those on the board. Here's some artillery. I'm going to put it underneath these. This is an easy way to keep track of it. 2 to 1, 2 to 1, and 2 to 1. Add a couple jet fighters in here, and underneath our stack of 4 mechanized infantry, I'm going to add 2 medium tanks. Now, we've got 38 points up top. Jet fighters are worth 5 apiece, so that's 10, 48. 12 more on that. These are worth 4 apiece on the artillery. And then 6 more here with the medium tanks apiece. Times 2 is 12 points in medium tanks. Right now, we've got a total of 72 points. Okay. Now, in staying with the same theme, for every 2 tactical units you buy, you're allowed to buy 1 special unit. Now the special units are going to be your heavy tanks and your self-propelled anti-aircraft. So let's go ahead and add a couple of those. I'm going to buy 1 heavy tank, 2 heavy tanks. I'm going to put it underneath here. You can see 2 to 1 and 2 to 1. Heavy tanks are worth 8 apiece, so I spent 16 more. Add that to the 72, you've got 88 points. We're almost there. Each army is now allowed to purchase up to 2 heavy bombers. Well, since they're 12 points apiece, I can only afford 1, so that's my 100-point army. In addition to this, each of the 3 armies in the game receives a bonus heavy bomber and heavy tank, making sure you've got plenty of firepower for fun. Okay, let's go set these up on the board and we'll move to the next step. Okay, here you can see the eastern coast of North America here. We're ready to set up our German forces. At the beginning of the game, the Axis forces must build their armies first. Then the Allied player gets to see the Axis builds and in turn respond to that build with their own build. So they get a kind of a heads up as to how the Axis are building their armies, and they get to build theirs to match that. However, the Allies must set up first. Then the Axis player gets to take their armies that they had to purchase first and place them last in response to the Allied setup. So we've already got our Allied forces set up here, and we've already got the Japanese forces set up on the west coast. So let's go ahead and start setting up our German forces to get this game on the road. The other thing I need to point out here is, of course, this map art is not the final art. We've still got that in the works. And the pieces you see here in the game are either historical board gaming pieces from other games, or some pieces from other games that are available on the market. Finally, we're using these as air-based cards. I'll explain a little bit more about that in a moment. These are just our demo pieces, and these aren't the ones that are going to come with the game. Ours are, of course, going to be matched a little bit better in artwork, and we'll have some additional information on it. First thing you do when setting up an Axis force is you need to put all of the aircraft you purchased on the aircraft card. So let's go ahead and do that. This represents off-map bases for the heavy bombers, as well as aircraft carriers for the fighters. Gives them a place to land before the Axis forces take any territories inland in the US or Canada. Okay, next thing, these are our invasion zones. We're allowed to set up in these 5 spaces at the beginning of the game. So generally you want to set up to try to hit those coastal cities. Those are worth the victory conditions for the Axis player. So those are the most important. You want to take them down as fast as possible to minimize the amount of reinforcement points that the Allied player is going to get. So let's go ahead and start dividing up our forces. The artillery is going to help us get inside those cities quickly, and anytime the artillery makes a hit inside a city, the defender actually doesn't get to fire back. So I'm going to park one of those out front of every one of the cities we've got. Next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to drop some infantry into each one of these zones. I'm going to put some up top there so we can try to take Ottawa on the next turn. Put some more infantry here to take Boston, New York, and DC. We also want to start pressuring the Allied player on Nashville. So I'm going to drop some infantry down here in this zone so I can try to rush in on Nashville here. Okay, next thing I'm going to do, let's make sure we've got some mechanized infantry up top along with a heavy tank. That way when the Allied player tries to divert forces up to Canada, we can go ahead and take them out there. Finally, I'm going to add some medium tanks to this invasion zone, as well as some mechanized infantry. Now, generally, you have to hold to a limit of 10 units per territory. That applies to all the land territories. In the invasion zones, there's no stacking limit, but it's going to be something you're going to have to deal with as soon as you move inland. So as you can see, this invasion zone is over 10 units now, but it's going to be split between these 2 territories, so we'll be okay by the time we hit land. Finally, we've got 2 more heavy tanks to place on the board. I'm going to drop one down here to start pressuring them, and I think I'm going to go ahead and put them both down there. Let's see how the Allies deal with that. Alright, looks like we're set up and ready to go for our first turn. Okay, here we are, all set up and ready for the first turn of the game. Now, on the first turn, the Axis are always going to start. It's possible for the Allies to take the initiative away from the Axis later on in the game and actually start the turn before the Axis. But for turn 1, the Axis players are going to start. So the first thing that happens on every turn is the player going first is going to place their builds from the prior turn. Well, being that this is turn 1, there was no prior build, so we're going to go ahead and skip that step. The next step is you need to purchase new reinforcements with your new build points. The Axis players get 30 points at the beginning of each turn. So I've got a 30-point purchase set up right over here. I've got mechanized infantry for 3, jet fighter for 5, medium tank here for 6, artillery for 4, foot soldiers are 2 apiece, I've got 2, and then rounded out an 8-point heavy tank. That's our 30-point build. Ready to go. Alright, third step in the turn, now you're going to move. So, starting with the Axis forces, I'm just going to move the Germans for demonstration purposes. So they're going to move in here. Taking this territory, we're going to put a control marker down there to show that it's theirs. Again, these are demo game control markers from another game. Ours are going to be different, look a little bit better. These forces in this invasion zone are going to end up splitting between Washington, D.C., this way, and New York, up here. Now, I've got 2 medium tanks and I want one to go each way, so I'm actually going to take this one off the chip. He's going to go towards New York, trade in the chip for another medium tank. He'll head the other way. And I've got some artillery and foot soldiers to move into Boston. And up here, Ottawa is not on the coast, so it's going to take 2 turns to get there. But these guys can definitely move in here. We'll put down another control marker and make sure we're going to threaten them on the next turn. Now finally, don't forget your aircraft. We've got some bombers and jet fighters to help us out with our attacks. So let's definitely take a bomber into DC, a bomber into New York, and then let's provide them with a little bit of air cover with the jet fighters. I'll explain how that works in a minute. Okay, that's our move. We're all set up and ready to go to start some combat. So for combat resolution, I'm just going to do one battle to show you how that works out. We'll take the most interesting one here in DC. So the first thing that we want to do is we're going to get the anti-aircraft from the cities to take their shots at the incoming enemy aircraft. So each city is equipped with an AA gun. It's going to hit on a 6 or less. So we're going to roll our 12-sided die for the AA gun in DC. See if we can knock out one of these aircraft. A 2. Awesome shot. But the German player is going to get to choose which aircraft it hits. So of course they're going to take the jet fighter. That's why he came along. Now here's the interesting part of America. Had that been a 1, that's what we call a luck shot in America. That means that the defender, or whoever is shooting, in this case it's the defender, was able to get a lucky shot in there and hit something real valuable. What that simply comes down to is the unit that's firing gets to choose from a particular list of units that it is allowed to hit. Well, when it's an anti-aircraft gun shooting an aircraft, that 1 would have enabled him to take out the bomber instead of the fighter. But he rolled the 2, so the fighter goes away. No chance to fire. Alright. Now, the next step is we want to fire that artillery first at the defending units. That's because if the artillery hits, the defending unit doesn't get to fire back. Let's check that out. A 12. Well, that's certainly bad news because that's the other interesting result here in America. Anytime an attacker, and this goes for the attackers only, rolls a 12, not only do they miss the target, but they fail their morale test. This artillery never even made it off the boat, and he's going to be stuck out in the water for the remainder of this turn, not even getting to fire. Alright, well, interesting battle already. Let's start going through the other units. I'll show you how those work. So, we've got 2 foot soldiers. They hit on a 2. Let's go ahead and roll some dice there. Looks like I got a pair of 4s. Now, those are both going to miss. We've also got 4 mechanized infantry. So I'm going to grab 4 dice. We'll throw those here. Alright, and we've got a pair of 10s, a 2, and a 3. Now, mechanized infantry hit on a 3 or less. They're a little bit better. So the 2 and the 3 are going to cause 2 hits. We'll put those aside to remind us. Finally, we've got a medium tank at a 10. That's going to miss. And a bomber. They actually hit at an 8. And there's our 8. Now, something special with the heavy bombers is cool. If they miss their first shot, they actually get to re-roll. They have a second chance of scoring that 1 hit. But since he hit on the first one, that's going to be it. And there's only 1 target left, so we know all the defenders are gone. It's always important in this game that all attacking units roll, regardless of how many targets are left. The reason for that is you never know when they're going to roll a 12 and be stuck out in the water, like this poor guy. Alright, infantry defend on a 4 in this one, so I'm going to grab 3 dice, 1 for each of the infantry there. We'll roll those. We've got a 4, a 5, and a 7. So the defending U.S. infantry are going to score 1 hit, but again, it's not a 1, so the German player gets to choose the hit, and of course, he's going to take one of those cheap infantry units. So we'll remove that chip. We'll remove these, and we'll place another German control marker right there in Washington, D.C. to show that they now control it. We'll move these units in, and we would follow suit for the rest of the battles on the board until all the combat was resolved. After combat is resolved, the aircraft need a place to go. They can't stay here because they just took this territory over, and that's not allowed by the rules. So this guy's going to fly back to the airbase card where he's nice and safe for the next turn. Bombers have an unlimited amount of movement. Versus the jet fighters, they're held to 6 and they've got to save enough points to get back home. So you can see, for example, this jet fighter with 6 points from the airbase card is going to cost him 1, 2, 3 movement points into New York. He's going to fight his battle. Then 4, 5, 6 back to the base card. He's safe. After that, if he goes farther inland, he's going to have to land in captured territories. Well, I certainly hope this clears up some of the way that combat is resolved in this game and the way that it moves along. You can see it's pretty fast. Of course, after all the Axis combat is resolved, we would move on to the Allied purchases, the Allied movement, and the Allied combat. Feel free again to contact us at america@historicalboardgaming.com with any questions, and thank you for checking out this Kickstarter demo.